The 136th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glove. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. I want to start off this episode by wishing everyone a happy Star Wars Day, and may the Force be with you. And Anthony, it's been a week since we last spoke, but we've got a lot to talk about. And the first thing we're going to dive right into is it came out last week that Caleb Love, the coveted 5-star point guard of this incoming 2020 class, said no to the G League and will definitely enroll at Carolina for the upcoming basketball season. And this got a lot of attention because we saw over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, you've seen some high-profile talent decide to skip college and go to the G League. I know Michigan's a school that's been really affected by this, and so it's really caused a stir within the NBA world, and of course those of us involved in college basketball. And I guess the first thing we need to talk about is what does this mean, I guess for Caleb Love, that he decided to not go make $100,000 or more come play for Roy Williams and for North Carolina.
Like how you jumped right into that, by the way, so that I couldn't call you out for being a nerd with your opening to the podcast. But I'm going to make sure that I get that in there first. In terms of the G League stuff with Caleb Love, dodged the bullet for Carolina, definitely, because we've talked about it enough here since Jeremiah Francis' transfer. This is a spot right now at point guard where the Tar Heels are extremely thin. And this has been the case the last 2 years. And as of right now, we really don't know what, if this is going to be a thing that's just going to continue yearly. It looks like it because it seems like starting point guard is definitely going to be a little bit of a revolving door over the next few years. But I think there are a lot of people that are a little concerned about it, especially going forward, and how it's not only going to affect Carolina, but how it's going to affect college basketball. And, we kind of talked about it a little bit in depth last night when we were talking, just getting ready for the podcast and everything. But, this is it's a situation that I think a lot of people are kind of afraid of, but that a lot of people shouldn't be afraid of, because this is very similar to exactly what we saw back in the late 90s into the early 2000s, which is guys going straight to the NBA. It's going to be a very similar situation. Now it's going to be the G League, so guys won't be able to get drafted. But basically, you're going to have the choice of where if you don't want to go to college and play college basketball for a year, you can choose to just go and play in the G League. And, during that time, college basketball really didn't suffer. College basketball was great in the mid to late 2000s because you had guys that stayed 3 or 4 years because they were there for one reason and one reason only. It was not to try to get themselves ready for the NBA. That was something that they were hoping was eventually coming. It was to make sure that they were going there to try to win a championship, especially if you went to the blue blood programs, especially like Carolina. And I think that's why, you know, if you're a Tar Heel fan, you really shouldn't be that concerned about this. And the other reason why is, I mean, you look at some of the other blue bloods that have been sort of recruiting this one-and-done style for a long time now. It's going to be harder for them to sort of transition. You got to think, Carolina really has just now gotten into getting one or two one-and-dones in the class. Even still, you got to think they're bringing in about 2 or 3 guys normally that are still going to stay for at least 2, possibly 3 or 4 years. That's where Carolina, I think, will be fine if, you know, this becomes a bigger thing than it's already starting to become. And you start to see some of these guys, you know, in 10 of the top 15, you know, 15 of the top 25 guys that go on to play in the G League. I think Carolina is a team, and Roy Williams especially as a coach, that's built to recruit the way that you're going to need to if things go back to those mid-90s, those late 2000s days where you're looking to bring in guys that are going to be there for a little bit, you can develop, but that can also help you lead to a championship. Whereas teams like Duke and Kentucky, with guys like Coach K, who's been doing this for a while now, it'll take him some time to adjust. And for John Calipari, we talked about it last night, he's the guy that probably won't ever adjust because he's been recruiting that way pretty much his entire life. He did it at Memphis. He did it at Kentucky now. And if he has to adjust, that's where there's going to be struggles. I'm not as concerned about Carolina, but it's good that for this class, Caleb Love is not going.
Well, the first thing you said is the most important thing, is that if Caleb Love would have decided to go to the G League, and if he would have made that decision, not going to blame the kid, especially with as much uncertainty that's in the air right now with the coronavirus pandemic. Who knows if the basketball season will start on time and whatnot. But if he would have decided to leave, Carolina would be in a situation at point guard where they don't want to be in. You lost Cole Anthony, Jeremiah Francis transferred, and Anthony Harris, you would figure won't be back until probably early December, probably January of next year, most likely. That means you're running probably RJ Davis, Leaky Black, and you're counting on KJ Smith once again being a viable, reliable ball handler. And we saw last year that's not going to work out successfully over the span of 10 games, let alone a whole season. And so I think that's where we got to breathe a sigh of relief, is that point guard is the most important position in this program. It always has been since Roy Williams came back and took over. If you lose Caleb Love, what are you going to do? You've already got so many other questions on the team. If you don't have a floor leader that you have a lot of trust in, that has a lot of talent, you're looking at another situation where you were this year, which was bottom of the ACC and probably not competing in the NCAA tournament. That's not something that Roy Williams is used to. That's not something us as Carolina fans are used to. And so I think that's where we got to just take a deep breath and thank the good Lord that Caleb Love decided to stay in college and will play for Carolina. And as for the G League stuff, I think that's going to be a more common trend, because if you can't make money in college, how do you expect an 18-year-old kid to say no to money? You can't, especially some of these kids that's their way out. That's how they're going to provide for themselves, take care of their families that are coming from rough neighborhoods. You're not going to expect them to say no. But also people that are so worried that if the NBA gets rid of the one-and-done rule, that college basketball is going to suffer, you're wrong. It's only going to help college basketball, because what you're going to learn is most of these kids are not ready to go from high school to the NBA. Yeah, Kobe Bryant did it. Yeah, LeBron James did it, but it took Kobe some time, and it even took LeBron two to 3 years where he could actually consistently dominate at the pro level. These kids aren't the same breed as Kobe and LeBron, so they're not going to be able to do that right away. So what you'll start finding out is they'll start going to school, and they'll start developing more and staying in school longer. But even so, as you mentioned, for the blue blood schools, that's what – I mean, if Carolina had to get back into recruiting 3 to 4 year guys – they're going to thrive. That's what Roy Williams wants to do. That's how the program's been built since Dean Smith took over in the 60s. It's more the Dukes and the Kentuckys that would have a harder time adjusting because for the last decade, that's how they ran their program. Let's get as many top 10 players as we can in here for 1 year, ship them out. Between the two, they have combined 2 national championships. With all the talent, they've not met expectations. So the college basketball product as a whole would be better. It would be much more fun to watch because the basketball would be better. And if you're a basketball purist like I like to claim to be, that's what you want. The game's good now, but it would be better if you had more experienced veteran talent. The talent in the game now is great, but it's not experienced, and that's why you see so many of these great high-profile teams flame out in March Madness, because they don't have the experience to win in a one-and-done situation. So that's why I think if, we're not an NBA podcast, let alone a G League podcast, if it ever gets resolved, it's only going to help both the college game and the NBA game. And I think that's what we got to strive to do is let's make the basketball better for both entities. That's what makes the NFL and college football so great. They got that relationship where you've got to be 3 years out of high school before you go to the NFL because they're not ready to play football at 18 years old with a bunch of 30-year-old men. That's why the college product has gotten better, and that's why the NFL product can still thrive when they bring in 21, 22-year-old kids. If the NBA would learn from that model, their product would be better, and as a result, the college product would be a lot better. So anything else, Caleb Love-wise, before we move on?
Well, not really Caleb Love, but I know there was some concern that this is going to be a challenge going forward with recruiting in terms of you're going to have guys that will commit to schools and then the G League will get to jump in. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think that's basically going to be part of kids' recruitment is the G League will have the option to jump in from the get-go and tell these kids, if you want to come to the G League, you can. If not, then you can go ahead and go through your recruitment and go wherever you need to. I think this is just a 1 year where this is kind of hitting at a bad time where guys were already committed, so the G League having to reach out pretty late and go after guys that are committed. I don't think we'll see as much of that going forward. So I wouldn't be overly concerned that over the next couple of years you're going to have to worry about guys committing and then at the last second leaving. I think that's really only going to be this year. So that's something that I think should ease some of the uncertainty about it. And ultimately, I mean, we talked about it, and you said it there. I think it's kind of going to be what's best for college basketball. A lot of people think the product is going to suffer. I think the exact opposite. I think that you're going to see guys that are there, as I said, to play for a national championship. So you're going to see guys that are a little more committed to the team aspect of college basketball, and I think it's just going to make it a whole lot better in the years to come.
Yeah, and that's something that, of course, as this develops over time, then, of course, we'll, monitor it here on the Royce Boys podcast. Moving on, this is more of a more general discussion topic. It does revolve or relate to Carolina because we've had some players enter the transfer portal in the last couple of years. And, look, this is something that in the last, 2 to 3 years, we saw it mainly on the football side. It's really gotten involved in the basketball side in the last couple of years as a lot of players are now entering the transfer portal after a year where they didn't experience the kind of playing time they wanted, a coaching change, etc. And for the most part, outside of certain circumstances, most kids are required to sit out 1 year if they decide to transfer. We've seen some instances, of course, in college football where Justin Fields got allowed to play right away and whatnot, and it's gotten a lot of media criticism. The thing I want to discuss is this. Should players, if they decide to transfer, be required to sit out a year? John Rothstein, the famed writer from CBS Sports, is very much in favor of that if you transfer, you should sit out a year. And not only were college basketball general fans giving him hell, there were other media that went after him for this take. I'm of the opinion that you should be allowed one time to transfer and not sit out a year, especially if you're moving back home due to a sick family member or something like that, and a coaching change. If a coach is allowed to leave a school and not sit out a year of coaching, why should a player who committed to the coach, and that's what we got to remember, in the 50s and 60s, you were committing to a school. In modern recruiting, you're not committing to that university. You're committing to that coach, that relationship you built with your main recruiter and the head coach of your program. Why should you be forced to sit out a year? I think it's contradictory on